Hey guys, my name's Adrian Despres. I work with Forge Ministries. I'm an itinerant evangelist and a vice president over the itinerant speakers. And I love the idea that I get to bring you a devotion here online. How you doing? Appreciate you so much. I want to talk about Jesus in Luke chapter 9, verses 51 to 56. Now, very interesting story. Jesus is coming south. He had just had the episode with the Mount of Transfiguration, and just before that, a week before that, was the Caesarea Philippi, when he asked the disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" The gates of hell will not prevail story, when Peter stands up and says, "You're the Christ, Son of the living God." And then later on he says, "Get behind me, Satan." And Jesus is telling him he's got to go down to Jerusalem and be executed. He sets his face towards Jerusalem. He knows 6 months later he's going to be executed on the cross. He knows that he's Jesus. He's coming south through Samaria. Now, I've been in this region, this area. This region, the Jews do not like to go through it because the Jews hate the Samaritans. They're tired, they're worn out, they're exhausted. And Jesus and the 12 disciples try to stop in a Samaritan village. The people from the village look at Jesus and they start cursing him and they kick him out and they say, "You're a Jewish person, you get out of here." James and John, two of Jesus' disciples, say, "Lord, should we call down fire to destroy him?" James and John, their nicknames are Sons of Thunder. They asked for Jesus if they could bring down fire like Sodom and Gomorrah. "Let's just burn them." Jesus rebuked them and went to another Samaritan village. A week later, in Luke chapter 10, I think it's a week later. I don't know for sure exactly how much further it is, but just days later, Jesus is asked in Jerusalem, "Who is my neighbor?" He's asked, "Who's my neighbor?" And he gives the parable of the Good Samaritan. Now, I don't know if you know the parable or not, but the Good Samaritan, this guy is going from it was a treacherous road. I've been on that road. I've seen the road and outside of Jerusalem going down towards the Jordan River. And it's a dangerous road. A lot of deaths has happened on that road. A lot of robbings and muggings. And this guy was going down this road and he gets beaten by a robber, a mugger, and he's left half dead. A priest and a Levite, religious leaders walk around. They don't want to touch him because they might die on him and they get kicked out of the church. But a Samaritan comes by and helps him out. And he is good to him. He's a good Samaritan. I'm walking out the back of the football office several years ago, and I reached down and pick up a Gatorade bar to throw it away because it's garbage on the ground. I think Jesus is seeing me picking up the garbage, so I'm going to pick up the garbage because I want to love Jesus today more than I did yesterday. So I throw the garbage away. This football player looks at me and says, "Look at that, man. You're a good You I looked at him and said, "Hey, you know what a Samaritan is?" He says, "No, but they're good." 2,000 years later, the people that the Jews hated, 2,000 years later, this football player thinks they're good people because of the parable of the Good Samaritan. In other words, a week before that when Jesus was kicked out, he never carried a grudge. See, carrying a grudge is like you drinking poison and waiting for the person who hurt you to die. I mean, you understand what I'm saying? It's a dangerous thing. Don't carry a grudge. It's called in John Bevere's book. The book's called The Bait of Satan. It's called The Bait of Satan. What is the bait of Satan? When Satan's fishing for us, when he wants control over us, when the little lure and the fish, I can grab the name of the bait is called offense. Somebody offends you. Maybe someone insults you, says something about you, says something about your parents, says something about your team, whatever. Somebody insults you. And now there's 5 different steps that happen after the bait of Satan is thrown out there to see if you've grabbed onto the bait or not. The first thing that happens is you become angry. Well, the scripture says, "Be angry and sin not." So we're allowed to be angry, but then James gives us a time period there. Be angry and sin not. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. No, I'm sorry, not James, Paul in Ephesians. Paul says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. So I'll give you 23 hours and 59 minutes and 59 seconds to be angry. That's what the scripture allows, just in case the sun just went down. You have 23. So you're allowed 1 day of anger, and that's it. He says, don't be angry and sin not. Don't let the sun go down on your anger, and don't give the devil a foothold. Well, what is a foothold? When you put your foot in the door, you can't shut the door. It doesn't really hurt my foot because I got my shoes on and whatnot. It's not going to hurt my foot. Don't give the devil a foothold in your life. Anger does that. Anger does not bring about the righteousness of God, it says in James. So anger is the first step. So someone offends you, you become angry. Second step, anger gives rise to resentment. Well, what is resentment? Resentment is outside. Somebody offends you. A painter messes up your house, you don't like all painters. A pastor insults you, does something bad, you don't like pastors. A driver cuts you off, a woman driver, a man driver cuts you off, you don't like those drivers. It's something like that happens. You don't like a football team. You don't like so resentment. So anger gives rise to resentment. Resentment's outside. Resentment gives rise to bitterness. Bitterness is inside. Hebrews says, let there not be a bitter root among you. So bitterness is inside. Now watch how this works. Somebody sins against you one time, then you sin back threefold, Satan wins. Somebody offends you, anger, resentment, bitterness, all three are biblical sins. You sin back threefold, Satan wins. Anger gives rise to resentment. Resentment gives rise to bitterness. Bitterness gives rise to self-pity. For guys, it's feeling sorry for ourselves. For women, it's self-pity. I don't know the difference. It's about the same to me. But I'm just saying, it's you start blaming yourself. Self-pity, anger gives rise to resentment. Resentment gives rise to bitterness. Bitterness gives rise to self-pity. Self-pity gives rise to depression. Now, it's not the only reason why people get depressed. There's chemical imbalances and stuff like that. But it's one of the reasons why people get depressed today is because they're holding this anger, this grudge inside of them, and it's festering and ruining and consuming their lives. Carrying a grudge is like you drinking poison and waiting for the person who hurt you to die. One time, I was painting this person's house, and I did mess up. Okay, I messed up. It was my fault. But she was mad at me. She was really, really mad at me. And I told her, if you don't move the sprinkler heads from the front of your house, then I'll have to be back a year later because that water's going to rot out your windowsills there. But she calls me a year later, starts to fuss on me on the phone and say, listen, my windowsills are completely rotted out. The painting is just completely coming off. I said, ma'am, did you move the sprinkler heads? Silence. I said, okay, move the sprinkler heads. I'll come in a couple weeks and we'll, get it all done. So she moves the sprinkler heads. I come a couple weeks later. The windowsills were all rotted out. It was nasty. So I cut through the windowsills and replaced the windowsills and put some pressure-treated lumber in there and wrapped it in metal and several coats of primer, several coats of finish, painted the whole front of her house again, another whole coat. She comes around the corner of my truck and says, how much do I owe you? I said, it's free. I put the paint on, it came off, but if you don't move the sprinkler heads, I'll be back next year too. She said, my mom hates my guts. I looked at my partner, painting partner, he's another preacher guy. Looked at him and looked, how do you know that? Well, she bought houses for my sisters and she's given us nothing. I said, sounds to me like you've gotten involved in the bait of Satan. She said, what's the bait of Satan? I said, well, if we're going to do this, I need your husband over here. I don't counsel with just you and I and my buddy here. You need your husband in here. So husband came over. I said, well, the bait of Satan is somebody offends you and you become angry. I said, have you been showing a lot of anger lately, spewing a lot of venom on people? Her husband just shook his head, going softly, easy. And I said, well, anger gives rise to resentment. I said, let me ask you a question. Have you resented all painters since you saw that paint come off? She said, yeah, yes, I have. I said, well, that's what happens. Somebody offends you and you become resentful of all people. You put them all in a big category. So anger gives rise to resentment. Resentment gives rise to bitterness. Is there bitterness inside of you? Is it deep-rooted? She said, yes. I said, bitterness gives rise to self-pity. She said, she starts to cry. She said, I've been blaming myself about this. I said, self-pity gives rise to depression. She said, I've been on antidepressants for a year and a half now because of this. I said, listen, there's only one way to cut the line and get out of the bait of Satan. Only one way to cut the line and get out of Satan wants every one of you listening to this ruined. He wants you to hold a grudge. I know somebody's hurt you. There's only one way to get out of the bait of Satan. That's to forgive the person who hurt you. No. Let me explain something to you now. I know some of you are thinking they don't deserve to be forgiven. Hold on a second. Let's look at the math because it's really just a math problem. This is in Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 to 33. Peter says, Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times? Now, in the Old Testament, you see 3 times max is what I can see. I've read through it several times. I can only find 3 times you're supposed to forgive somebody. When Peter says 7 times, the disciples are thinking, Peter, you're a stud. What in the world? You're awesome. Jesus looks at him and says, no, 490 times. 77. 70 times 7, 490 times. And they go, what? Then Jesus gives this parable. And it's interesting how this parable is really interesting to me. He says there was a rich ruler, who had a guy who owed him 10,000 talents of gold. A talent, 75 pounds. That's 750,000 pounds of gold times 16 ounces is some kind of number there. Times we'll say $1,600 an ounce. I don't know. There was at one time $1,600 an ounce. We'll call 19.6 billion. I didn't say I said billion dollars. 19.6 billion. This guy owed the king $19.6 billion debt. Okay? You understand what I'm saying? The king says to him, pay back what you owe me. And the guy falls on his knees and says, "Oh, king, please don't throw me in prison. Don't torture me. I'll pay back what you owe me. If you throw me in prison, I won't be able to pay it back." So the king had mercy on him and forgave him the entire debt, $19.6 billion. That guy goes out. Okay, follow the parable. It's a great parable. That guy goes out, and another guy owes him 100 denarii. Now, a denarii is a day's wage. So let's say 100 denarii is a third of a year. If you make $75,000 a year, that's $25,000. A guy owed the guy who got forgiven $19.6 billion. Another guy owed him $25,000. So he grabbed the guy and choked him and said, "Pay back what you owe me." That guy falls on his knees and says, don't throw me in prison, I'll pay it back." That guy threw him in prison and had him tortured. The king hears about it. The king goes up to that servant and says, "You wicked servant, I forgave all that debt of yours. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your brother just as I had on you?" And he threw him in prison and tortured him until he should pay back the $19.6 billion debt. What? That's the bait of Satan. The torture, anger, resentment, bitterness, self-pity, depression. That's torture. When somebody offends us and we don't pay them back. See, who are you in that parable? See, when somebody offends me, I'm the guy who got forgiven $19.6 billion. I was saved. The Lord saved me. I was on a one-way ticket to the pit of hell, and God in His mercy saved me. Are you kidding me? I got saved. I deserve hell, and God gives me heaven. That's $19.6 billion. The worst thing that can happen to me. Now, okay, let me think. Okay, got a little teary eye here. Sorry. The worst thing that can happen to me, somebody hurts my wife. That would be the worst thing that could happen to me. Okay? The worst thing that could happen to me is roughly $25,000 in comparison to the $19.6 billion that I've been forgiven. $25,000. So if somebody hurts my wife, they're going to go to prison, no question. Forgiveness and justice still work hand in hand. But in prison, I'll forgive them because forgiveness is not for me; it's for them. I'll be free too, though. I get the benefit. I want to see. What is forgiveness? Let's explain forgiveness. One time when I was in college, a guy grabbed me I had big curly hair, just relaxed. I had big curly hair. And a guy grabbed me by the hair and bashed my head up against the wall and said, "You broke my chair." I looked at him and said, "I didn't break your chair. That chair was already broken before I got in here. I didn't break your chair." And he was mad at me, thought I broke his chair. I didn't break his chair. So he was the leader of Young Life Ministries. I was the president of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. You understand what I'm saying? I did not like Young Life for the next 6 months. Couldn't stand Young Life. A person comes up to me out of the blue. I don't know. Spirit of God told him. I don't know how. I'm a conservative guy, but I know the Spirit of God moves pretty freely. So first he comes up to me and says, "Adrian, are you mad at somebody?" I said, "Don't you see the halo on my head? I'm the president of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes." I didn't say that, but that's what I was thinking. And then the Lord speaks to my heart. "What about Mark?" And I remember, wait a minute. I've been mad at Mark for 6 months. Went to my room and got on my knees. And I'm going to give you the product of forgiveness. This is what I learned on my knees, what forgiveness really is. Forgiveness has 2 parts to it. Actually, what I'll do is I'll give you 3 products of it, something that happens after forgiveness. You're driving down the road, and you remember how the person hurt you. And you're holding on to the steering wheel, and you get this anger in you, and it just starts to well. After you've forgiven them, the first product is you remind yourself out loud, "Nope, I forgave him." Say it out loud just in case it's come out of your mouth, come in your ears, and the enemy can't hear our thoughts, so say it out loud in case he's around. I don't know about that stuff anyways, but just in case. Number 2, you're in a conversation with somebody, and they've been hurt the same way you got hurt in the past. You don't pipe in. "Yeah, same thing happened to me." No, you forgave your person, so you don't pipe in. Number 3, you ever heard of a straw that breaks a camel's back? How can a straw break a camel's back unless there's 2 million other straws? When you forgive somebody, you dump out all the straws. Then the next straw just feels like a straw. You treat that straw as if it's brand new. So if the person hurts you again in the same way, this is a willful decision. It's very difficult to do. Very difficult to do. You willfully say, "No, I forgive you again because this one's brand new." Those are the 3 products of forgiveness. But what is forgiveness? Forgiveness doesn't mean to forget. You can't forget. That's just stupid. You can't forget. Maybe when I get older, I'll forget, but that's an accident. So forgiveness is twofold. Number 1, you release the person from the responsibility for what they've done. you release them. Release them. But if someone hurts somebody, then they're still going to go to prison. There's still going to be justice. But in prison, you can release them. Forgive them. I release you from the responsibility of what you've done. Number two, the part that when you really know you've forgiven them, is when you pray blessings on them. Scripture says in Colossians 3, I think it's in verse 9, Colossians 3:9 says, forgive as the Lord forgave you. Maybe it's 3:15, somewhere in there. But it's forgive as the Lord forgave you. Well, how did the Lord forgive me? He forgave me, washed me clean, and he poured out blessings on me. So you pray blessings on the person. Well, when this lady who was fussing at us, and I told her she needs to cut the bait, and get out of the bait of Satan, she called her mom. Her mom said, I thought you hated me. She said, no, I thought you hated me. And they've become best friends. Let me just tell you this right now. Don't let Satan win in anything in your life. Take your collective fist and punch him right in the face by forgiving the people who hurt you. Love you guys. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.